Welcome to the Explainer. So if you've been following the 2026 Formula One season at all, you already know it's been absolutely breathless. I mean, we're looking at a season defined by incredibly high stakes, dramatic twists, and honestly, a narrative that literally belongs in a Hollywood script. Today, we're going to unpack what is arguably the most dramatic storyline on the entire grid right now, George Russell's 2026 campaign. It's rapidly evolved into the absolute toughest test of his entire racing career. We're going to dive into the data, the crazy sequence of events, and the psychology behind a championship challenge that's currently hanging by a thread. How did it all go so wrong? Let's get right into it.
Section 1. A Tale of Two Teammates. Okay, so we really need to dive into this dynamic because it sets the stage for everything we're about to cover. On one side of the Mercedes garage, you've got Kimi Antonelli. He's the teenage sensation who's completely taken the motorsport world by storm. We're talking about a driver who, at one point, strung together 5 consecutive race victories, and he's just looked so incredibly cool and composed under pressure, right? And then, in the other corner, you have George Russell. Russell entered this season not just as the veteran presence in the team, but as a genuine championship favorite. Yet, instead of fighting purely for wins, he's found himself in the fight of his life against just a relentless, unforgiving tide of bad luck and technical gremlins. The contrast between these two, it literally couldn't be sharper.
Section 2. The Unraveling begins.
Let's actually track how this builds because it brilliantly illustrates how incredibly fast fortunes can change in Formula One. Now, things actually started with a massive glimmer of hope. Russell wins the opening race in Australia. Boom, the momentum was entirely with him. But as Antonelli began his meteoric rise, Russell's campaign started to fracture. In Japan, an ill-timed safety car cost him dearly. Then in China, a qualifying issue compromised his whole weekend. But the real gut punch? Oh man, that was in Canada. Russell was on pole, he was leading the race, holding off his teammate perfectly. And then, disaster strikes. A catastrophic battery failure left his car totally stranded. It turned a guaranteed massive points haul and a potential win into a heartbreaking retirement. This wasn't just a lost race, you guys. It was the psychological turning point where a one-off issue officially became a devastating pattern.
You know, when you experience that sequence of mechanical failures, it really stops being just an engineering problem and becomes a deeply psychological one. The growing pressure was taking an unprecedented toll on Russell. While his rookie teammate was out there racking up wins and looking totally unflappable, Russell was growing increasingly frustrated. He even admitted in interviews that he had never, ever experienced a season like this in all his years of racing, not in Formula One and not even in the junior categories.
And that brings us to this really fascinating diagnosis from Mercedes team boss Toto Wolff. He pointed out that in such a high-pressure environment, especially when you have a young teammate performing so well, you can easily get yourself into a dangerous spiral of overthinking. He explained that you start asking yourself, what can I do more? Where do I need to optimize? When the car fails you repeatedly, the huge danger is that the driver starts trying to overcompensate. And that creates a spiral that can absolutely destroy a championship campaign from the inside out.
Section 3. A Glimmer of Hope.
But right in the middle of all this chaos, Russell showed some immense resilience. He secured a vitally important victory at the Austrian Grand Prix. That win was just a massive reminder of his raw ability. And he didn't stop there. He carried that momentum straight into his home race at Silverstone, securing a brilliant second-place finish. So, the result of this massive fightback? He actually managed to cut Antonelli's seemingly insurmountable championship lead down to just 25 points. Heading into the late summer, it truly looked like the tide was finally turning back in Russell's favor.
Section 4. Back-to-back heartbreak. We have to break down what happened next at the Belgian Grand Prix, because it was a weekend that essentially torpedoed his title hopes all over again. Let's walk through this crazy sequence. First, Russell gets a fantastic start from third on the grid. He's exactly where he needs to be. But then, a sudden, critical mechanical glitch rears its head. His car's battery deployment completely fails, so he instantly loses power and is just swallowed up by the pack down the massive Kemmel Straight. That's a section of the track where battery deployment is literally the only thing keeping you from going backwards. And finally, because he was so slow and vulnerable, it led directly to a race-ending collision with his former teammate, Lewis Hamilton. A completely brilliant start, totally ruined by the machinery in a matter of seconds.
I mean, imagine pouring your entire life into a championship fight, only to feel this way. He said, I am numb to the disappointment. When it happens so often, you just get used to it. Man, that is incredibly tough to hear from such a fierce competitor. It really shows how the relentless pattern of bad luck had temporarily worn down even his fierce optimism. You just can't brush off race-ending failures when they happen this frequently.
And the consequence of that Belgian crash? Yeah, it was severe. While Russell was out of the race, Antonelli capitalized flawlessly. He took a dominant victory, and as a result, he doubled his championship lead over Russell to a commanding 50 points. That 25-point gap Russell had fought so incredibly hard to close, it was completely erased in a single afternoon.
So the crucial point here is how the team responded at the very next race in Hungary. This was supposed to be the big reset. Instead, it was a data analyst's worst nightmare. Just consider this comparison of their 0 to 100 km/h acceleration off the starting line. Antonelli launches in a standard, rapid 2.9 seconds. Russell? He takes a shocking 4.2 seconds. Why? Because right at the launch, Russell's car triggered its anti-stall system. That's a safety mechanism meant to stop the engine from dying, which, ironically enough, killed his entire race instead. While the rest of the field roared away, Russell was left virtually stationary on the grid. In a split second, he plummeted from the front of the pack all the way down to 18th place. Now, Russell actually managed to put together a truly heroic recovery drive to claw his way back to 7th place by the end of the race. But honestly, the damage to his championship campaign was already done. Reflecting on this frankly unbelievable string of events, he reiterated his absolute disbelief, saying, "I wouldn't wish this on anyone, but I've never experienced a season like this."
Section 5. The mountain to climb. 59. That is the number that defines George Russell's current reality. Following the absolute disaster in Hungary, he is now 59 points behind Kimi Antonelli in the championship standings. With only 11 races remaining in the 2026 season, overcoming a 59-point deficit against a teammate who's driving identical race-winning machinery, that's a monumental, almost unprecedented task.
To really put that mountain into perspective, former Haas team boss Guenther Steiner offered a characteristically blunt, almost painful assessment. He stated that, mathematically and realistically, George Russell's chances of winning the title now stand at just 5%. 5%! I think it perfectly encapsulates the severity of the situation after a season derailed not by a lack of driver pace, but by the absolute cruelest of luck.
Yet despite that daunting 5% metric, and despite a season that frankly would have broken a lot of other drivers, Russell's mindset is exactly what makes this explainer so fascinating. He remains incredibly defiant. He stated, "I definitely feel this is the most resilient I've ever been in my whole life. I take pride in that. I still believe in myself and the team, even when everything looks against us." He acknowledges the psychological battle. He feels the frustration for sure, but he is flat out refusing to let that spiral of overthinking defeat him entirely.
Which brings us to the ultimate question as we wrap up this explainer. George Russell is currently standing at a massive crossroads. He's got the pace, he definitely has the resilience, but he is fundamentally fighting the machinery and a massive 59-point gap. So can he and Mercedes finally get on top of these gremlins after the summer break, or is 2026 going to go down in history as a brilliant championship challenge derailed entirely by bad luck? Based on all the crazy data we've unpacked today, can George Russell actually defy that 5% chance? I would absolutely love to hear your thoughts on this. Thanks so much for joining me, and keep exploring the data.